Waters' Orwellian beast fable is unlike anything previously recorded by this band. But is it the last truly great Pink Floyd album? Let's find out, shall we? Animals is a seminal Pink Floyd album, but one eclipsed by Dark Side of the Moon and overshadowed by The Wall. It's a bit of a lost album. Nevertheless, it's an album that snouted its way back into the limelight with the recent James Guthrie 2018 remix and subsequent release. However, at the heart of the matter, I suspect it's Gilmour wanting to assert that he owns the Pink Floyd brand, whilst Waters is still permanently niggled at the fact that he is in fact Pink and can only rage and seethe from the sidelines. And the casualty of this spat is, as always, the Pink Floyd fans who were hoping for an impressive release, something akin to the 2011 immersion box sets for Dark Side of the Moon, Wish You Were Here and The Wall. Instead, we felt a little bit fobbed off with what many have described as a bleached remix of the 1977 classic. No live recordings, no swag, no marbles, and more importantly, without those offending Mark Blake liner notes. The offending Water-endorsed notes were omitted to preserve what Gilmour describes as the mystique of the band. Waters has suggested that Gilmour didn't like the notes because he wanted to claim more credit than is his due for this album. Subsequently, Waters publishes the notes on his own website, with a resounding raspberry in Gilmour's general direction. Yet this is just another murky page in this album's history, along with the Montreal spitting incident and that inflatable pig winging its way unfettered across the South London skies. However, despite the gloomy hum of that original mix, it still contains moments of incredible beauty. For example, Gilmour's transcendent guitar phrasing, the scathing societal tropes, howls, snorts and bleats, all make up the sonic palette of this record, and let's not forget those jazzy keyboard stabs of Richard Wright. Nevertheless, despite such ornamentation, it's a spiky album. Some might even say a punk album. Many have argued that this album is a kind of a reaction to those phlegmy upstarts pogoing their way across the inner cities, declaring no future from the tenement blocks. Mark Blake, writing for Classic Rock in 2022, states, "Filled with self-lacerating attacks on capitalism and financial gluttony, Animals channeled as much righteous anger as any punk album." Certainly there was some push and shove at the time between the new kids on the block and those that were viewed to be kind of the more prehistoric elements of the rock establishment. John Lydon famously sported that "I Hate Pink Floyd" t-shirt, although he has subsequently gone on to say he actually loves Pink Floyd. And Rat Scabies, speaking on this very channel, has said that he admires Pink Floyd live at Pompeii, especially Nick Mason's drumming.
I still like what he did live at Pompeii. You know, is one of the greatest sort of, for me anyway, was probably his finest out for me, because it was a guy on a drum kit playing his heart out. You know, that was.
And Nick Mason, of course, produced the Damned's 1977 album Music for Pleasure. So I suspect the whole punk thing, many elements of it, were just a bit of divisive rock theatre. Almost as bad, in fact, as sticking great big cardboard bricks between yourself and your paying audience. However, as regards the punk question, as interesting as it is, it's interesting to view this album in its context of the emerging punk movement and the 1976 oppressive heatwave. Let's not forget that much of this material was actually thrashed out a few years prior to the British punk movement and the Sex Pistols safety pinning themselves to London's high streets. Nevertheless, Animals has been described by Nick Mason as the band's roughest album. Primarily, he's referring to the recording sessions at Britannia Row, the newly refurbished Britannia Row studios that were described by Roger Waters as being a bit prison-like. One often has to wonder to what extent did the claustrophobic environments of this studio, as well as the aforementioned 1976 oppressive heatwave, contribute to the atmosphere of this album. But one thing for sure about Animals is it lacks the broader existential themes, charm, and sense of wonder that we got with Dark Side of the Moon. Likewise, it's also devoid of that elegiac elegance that was draped over Wish You Were Here, bereft of those graceful, haunting chimes, tape loops, piano pieces, or ka-chinging cash registers. This album sticks out of the band's discography like a sore thumb, with lines that splutter and tear with rage. Lines like "you fucked up old hag" or "you're just another sad old man all alone and dying of cancer." It's hardly surprising that this album is not everybody's bag of feed. In the track "You've Got to Be Crazy," the number of course which morphed into Dogs, Waters' lyrics barked a series of imperatives, reinforcing the idea of subjugation and humiliation in the dog-eat-dog world of middle-class corporate aspirations. You've got to be mean, you've got to keep your shoes and your car clean, you've got to keep smiling, got to keep fit, got to keep drinking, you've got to eat shit. In terms of the old punky argument, I get where they're coming from, but there was always a bit of snarl in Waters' lyrics when he effectively seizes the creative reins from Syd Barrett, or inherits them, one might say. For example, the opening lines of Corporal Clegg. Corporal Clegg had a wooden leg, he won it in the war in 1944. Kind of anticipating the same sentiment expressed in Us and Them a few years later. Forward he cried from the rear and the front rank died. Or in the much later When the Tigers Broke Free and the Anzio bridgehead was held for the price of a few hundred ordinary lives. Waters' writing always contained that observational sneer, but it's quite unlike the unrestrained spleen vented on this album. So why has this album been critically ignored? Well, first of all, many feel it's a challenging listen. And it's hardly surprising that the Gilmour-fronted Floyd of the 1980s and 90s effectively ignored it, perhaps feeling it was far too contaminated by Roger. Although it was rumoured that when they compiled the set list for the 1987 Momentary Lapse of Reason, Sheep was actually considered for the set list, momentarily. However, this number, like the rest of the album, was just put out to graze. We had to, as fans, we had to content ourselves with the only nod to this record being the huge inflatable porker that would drift out across the audience during their rendition of One of These Days. Animals is truly the last great Pink Floyd album. There, I said it. Of course, Roger Waters' solo material lacks the tempering influence of Gilmour's mellifluous voice and sublime guitar work. Likewise, the waterless Floyd for many is too beige and devoid of that conceptual bite. That's not to say there aren't moments of greatness post-77. Of course there are. I personally think The Wall, side 1 and 2 are fantastic. However, side 3 is a bit patchy and I've lost complete interest by side 4. The final cut feels a little bit cobbled together. And often these albums just feel like Roger Waters albums with guest musicians. What makes Pink Floyd great and what makes this album the last truly great album is that conceptual fusion with the music. But what of The Division Bell, you say? That's a great album. I think it's a great album. There's no doubt there are moments of ornate musical excellence on these albums. High Hopes, Keep Talking. But they lacked that lyrical sneer and conceptual brilliance of Waters' writing. The Division Bell, in my opinion, is a lush album. As lush as a Kleenex forest, Lester Bangs might say. But it lacks that lyrical and observational edge, the Waters edge. The Gilmour-led Floyd is very charming, it's very ornate, but it's lacking any real sense of danger and friction. And the reason why Pink Floyd's Animals is the last truly great Floyd album is because it's that last example of that fusion between conceptual brilliance and musical grace. You've been watching a video by Classic Album Review. Please like, share and click that notification bell to help this channel grow. And share this video. If you agree or disagree with me, let's hear what you've got to say in the comments below. Anyway, thank you for watching. Hope you're well, staying safe, and that you keep listening.